In this video, we are going to begin our discussion on Chapter 8, which involves price controls. Now, before we get started talking about price controls, we're going to talk a little bit about prices in general. All right, so prices have two very important functions. Prices act as a signal and an incentive, all right? So they signal the most valuable or how valuable a good is, right? Containing all the information about alternative uses for whatever good you're looking at and the value of those alternative uses, right? So all of that information, kind of an economy's worth of information, really is boiled down into a single number, right, for consumers and producers to make decisions off of, right? So acts as a signal, contains a lot of information that we wouldn't really be able to get about these goods without prices. Right? They also act as an incentive, right? So they incentivize people to make decisions, right, that reflect the value of goods, right? For instance, if you are going to be making pencils, right? If you're a manufacturer of pencils, right, you're probably not going to buy mahogany as the wood part of the pencil, right? Mahogany has higher value uses for things like furniture making, right? And probably some other stuff, but that's probably the big one, right? And so the price, right, of mahogany would be so high that if you did use it for pencils, nobody would buy those pencils from you because you'd have to charge such a high price to make your costs up, right? Instead, right, these prices are going to, one, signal to you that mahogany is probably too valuable to be used to make pencils, right? And then it'll also point you towards something that is less valuable and more suitable for making pencils, like pine or cedar, right? And so these are what allow the economy to kind of actually work. How do we get to our equilibrium? How people working without any connection to each other can kind of create goods, right? They require a lot of steps, right? Now, when you go and take principles of microeconomics, you'll get more into that, right? But for us, this is really just what we need. We need to know, right? Prices act as signals and incentives. They only act this way if they are allowed, if the market is free, all right? If prices are allowed to change as the market demands. All right. So again, prices act as signals and incentives. They also play a very big role, right? Or I should say, and because of that, they play a very large role in efficiently allocating resources. So what we're going to be talking about with these price controls, right? These prevent the market from operating efficiently. Right, so when we are looking at these price controls in general, right, the big thing that we're going to see as we go through this chapter is that they prevent the market, or really prevent prices from efficiently directing resources to the highest value uses by distorting that price signal, right? It's really a distortion of the signal and the incentive. We're going to kind of get into that later in probably the next couple of videos. All right, but that is kind of price controls overall. Now there are two types of price controls that we're going to be talking about, and so we're just going to go ahead and put those up here. All right, so the first one is a price ceiling. All right, now a price ceiling is the maximum price allowed by law. All right, so if a consumer or a producer tries to kind of receive or give a higher price than the price ceiling, that is illegal. Right, so a lot of times we think of these as affecting just either producers or consumers. Usually in the case of price ceilings, we see it as kind of affecting producers more, right? Saying that, hey, you know, this is not good for producers. We're really saying it's bad for producers because we're preventing them from trying to get more money and being greedy. That's kind of a common refrain for why price ceilings should happen, right? However, it's not just the producers that are affected, right? Because not only can producers not charge a higher price, consumers can't offer a higher price. So even if, say, it's something that you really need, you can't try to outbid somebody that doesn't need it as badly, right? By offering a higher price. We're gonna talk about that as well in a future video. All right, but that is what a price ceiling is. Probably one of the best known examples of price ceilings would be rent control. Right, so rent control, if anyone is unfamiliar with the concept of rent control, this is where usually kind of the city government somewhere, this happens a lot in bigger cities, more in like, say, like a New York City or something like that, and certain parts or certain housing units are designated as rent controlled, and the rent is stuck at a certain level, right? And the property owner, right, or whoever is managing it cannot raise the price any higher than that, all right? And so that would be a price ceiling, or an example of a price ceiling, right? The price set by that governing board, right? That is the highest price, the maximum price allowed by law. If you are trying to charge higher rent than that rent control, right, that is illegal. All right, one last thing about these price ceilings. So a price ceiling is binding if the price ceiling is less than the equilibrium price. Right, so what we mean by binding is just that it's taking effect, right? And so kind of all of the things that we're going to talk about in the next video, right, only really applies to a binding price ceiling, right? Because if the price ceiling is above, if the maximum price allowed by law is above the equilibrium price, then it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't take effect because nobody's gonna, you know, you're not gonna hit that ceiling, right? And that is why it's called a ceiling, right? If the price ceiling, if the, you know, we'll have a graph later on and we can see this a little bit better, but again, if the price ceiling is above the price, then you're not gonna hit the ceiling. You're gonna stop at the equilibrium price. So it's only binding, it only actually has an effect if the price ceiling is less than the equilibrium price. All right, so those are, that is a price ceiling. Next, let's talk about price floors. That's the other type of price controls. I guess we can just say price floor. All right, so probably can figure out what a price floor is based on what a price ceiling is, and it is a minimum price allowed by law. All right, a common example of this would be minimum wage. All right, so in this case, in this instance, the kind of people who give their, sell their labor or rent their labor to other people, they are the producers in this case, right? So you are producing labor and the minimum wage is the price of that labor, right? Or just the wage is the price of that labor, right? And so when we have a minimum wage, right, that's saying this is the least you can offer somebody, right? But again, so in this case, really we say, well, this kind of is good for the producer because they're going to get more money, right? This is good for the producer, good for the worker, the employee, because they're going to get more money. But as we're going to see in a future video, that's not always necessarily the case, right? Because not only does it mean that employers can't offer you less than the minimum wage, right? Even if you wanted to as a worker, you could not accept a wage less than the minimum wage, right? Even if you were completely fine with working for that amount of money, right? You wouldn't legally be allowed to do that. All right, so similarly with our price floor, we're also going to talk about, our price ceiling. We're going to talk about when a price floor is binding. In this case, a price floor is binding only if it is greater than the equilibrium price. Right? If it's not greater than the equilibrium price, then the market will set kind of equilibrium wages to that equilibrium price. We're only going to be prevented from getting there if we have a price floor. All right, so that is kind of a quick overview of these price controls. We're going to continue talking about these in the next couple of videos. What we're really going to be doing is looking at the effects of these different price controls. So we're going to look in the next video, we're going to be looking at the effect of a price ceiling. We're going to get into actually drawing out some graphs and some models so we can see it in action a little bit more. And then the video after next, we will look at the effects of a price floor. All right, but I will see you in those next videos.